Disney Princess Cinderella, Princess in Disguise. Cinderella's life had changed overnight. One day, she was cleaning and cooking for her stepmother and stepsisters. The next day, she was married to the prince and living in a palace. Cinderella loved living there, but sometimes it felt strange to have the royal staff waiting on her. She often wanted to help. In the morning, she would make her own bed before the maids come in. In the afternoon, she would sometimes invite her maids to join her for tea. Most of all, Cinderella wanted to get to know the royal staff better. She remembered how lonely she'd been at her stepmother's house. She hoped the maids knew that she was their friend, but whenever Cinderella tried to chat with them, they would politely smile and hurry away to finish other chores. One morning at breakfast, Cinderella told the prince that she was worried. "I want to make sure the servants are happy working here," she said, "but I can't seem to get any of them to talk to me." "Wouldn't they tell us if something was wrong?" the prince asked. Cinderella nodded. "I suppose so. I just wish there was a way to know for certain." Later that morning, Cinderella talked with her mouse friends Jacques and Gus. "There must be something I can do to find out if the staff is happy," she said. "But no one is going to tell me what they really think." "They would have talked to you before," Jacques said. "Cinderella didn't look like a princess then." Suddenly, Cinderella's eyes lit up. "You've just given me an idea," she exclaimed. "Thank you, Jacques." First, she went to the costume closet and found a wig. Then, she headed straight to the maid's quarters. Luckily, no one was there. A few minutes later, Cinderella came out dressed as a member of the royal staff. Cinderella walked down the hallway. She hoped no one would recognize her. She hadn't lived in the castle very long, so many of the servants hadn't met her yet. A moment later, she came upon a maid carrying a heavy tub of water. "Are you new to the castle?" the maid asked when she saw Cinderella. "I don't remember meeting you before." "Actually, I am," Cinderella answered with a smile. She helped the maid carry the large tub to the center of the ballroom. "Do you like working here?" Cinderella asked. "Well, yes," the maid said. She thought for a moment. "But there are some things I would change." "Like what?" Cinderella asked. "Like this tub," the maid replied. "If only it were on wheels." "Why don't you suggest it?" Cinderella said. "Oh, the royal family is very busy," the maid said. "I wouldn't want to bother them." Next, Cinderella headed over to the banquet hall. Some of the royal staff members were at a long table. They chatted happily as they polished the silver. "Come join us," one of the maids called. Cinderella walked over and examined the gleaming silver. "This looks like it's been polished already," she said. "It was just yesterday," the maid replied, "but we're supposed to polish it every day. Rules are rules." Just then, Cinderella heard a voice coming from down the hall. It was Prudence, the head of the royal household. Cinderella ducked out of sight. "Excuse me," Prudence said, pulling aside one of the maids. "When you are finished here, I'll need you to polish the backup silver." Cinderella thought. She wondered if the royal family even knew they had backup silver, or that it got polished so often. When the polishing was finally finished, Cinderella went to the palace sewing room. She had not met the seamstresses yet. What would they have to say? When Cinderella entered the room, one of the seamstresses smiled. "Thank goodness Miss Prudence sent some extra help," she exclaimed. "We have to finish all these gowns for the ball on Saturday." "They're beautiful," Cinderella said, admiring the dresses. "Gowns are my favorite things to sew," another seamstress chimed in. "Each time I finish one, I imagine what it would be like to wear it. Just once I wish we could go to a ball." I would dance and dance all night long, she sighed. What I wish, added another seamstress, is that we had more light in here. I can barely see the lace I'm stitching. Cinderella nodded. With just a few changes, it would be easy to make these wishes come true. Soon, it was time for lunch. Cinderella followed the maids to the kitchen. She was delighted to see steaming bowls of soup and big slices of crusty bread laid out on a long table. But just as everyone sat down, a bell rang. The signal meant that one of the royal staff members was needed for a task. A butler at the end of the table got up. He hadn't even had a chance to taste his soup. How silly, thought Cinderella. I'm sure it would be easy to plan chores around the staff meals. Prudence must have known she was interrupting lunch when she rang the bell. Cinderella slipped away from the kitchen to think. She thought of the maid with her tub of water. She thought of the silver that was polished every day and the dark sewing room. Servants were happy working at the palace, but with a few small changes, they could be even happier. And she knew just the way to make that happen. Cinderella smiled. She had some work to do herself. Quickly, Cinderella went to change back into her own clothes, but before she could, she bumped into the prince. The prince didn't recognize her at first, but then his eyes grew wide. "Cinderella!" he exclaimed in surprise. "Why ever are you dressed like that?" Cinderella smiled and told him the whole story. "I realized that the only way to make sure the staff was happy was to dress up as a maid myself," she explained. "Fortunately, they didn't recognize me, and they shared the most wonderful ideas about things that would be so easy to change. Let's go see the king and the Grand Duke. I have so much to tell you all." Cinderella changed, and then they went to see the king and the Grand Duke. "I had quite an adventure today," Cinderella told them. "I worked alongside the royal staff, and I got some ideas for small changes that would make a big difference." "What did you have in mind?" the king asked, curious. "Well, changing what they work on, for a start," Cinderella replied. "I think they do the same job over and over when they could be doing other jobs that the royal family would truly appreciate, and it would be more interesting for them." The king nodded thoughtfully. "What a grand idea!" he exclaimed. "What else do you suggest?" The afternoon, Cinderella asked Prudence to gather the royal staff together. "It's nice to see you all again," Cinderella said. Everyone was confused. No one remembered seeing her earlier that day. Cinderella held up her disguise. "I was wearing this," she explained, "and I worked alongside you. After hearing what you had to say, we're going to make some changes." The servants looked at one another nervously. "From now on," Cinderella said, "all the wash tubs will be on wheels. The silver will only be polished when it needs to be. More windows will be added to the sewing room, and your meals will no longer be interrupted." The royal staff was astonished. "Oh, and you are all invited to the royal ball on Saturday night," Cinderella smiled. "Does anyone have anything to add?" "Yes, princess," a butler said. "Miss Prudence has fainted." That Saturday night, Cinderella and the prince greeted each of the royal staff members by name as they entered the ballroom. Cinderella thanked the seamstresses for the beautiful dress they had sewn for her, the cooks for the delicious food, and the maids for making the castle sparkling clean. The servants smiled happily as they joined in the dancing. They were growing quite fond of their new princess. The end.